My name is Eleanor. I'm 78 years old, and for most of my life, I believed in the power of family. I was the kind of woman who baked cookies for my grandchildren every Sunday, who sewed blankets for birthdays, and who made sure every holiday had a touch of warmth even when we had very little money. I was never rich in the way people count dollars, but I was rich in love. Or so I thought. I grew up in a time when loyalty meant something. I married young, had 3 children, and did everything in my power to raise them right. My husband, George, passed away 10 years ago. We were married for 52 years. Losing him felt like someone tore a part of my soul away, but I carried on, for the sake of my children and grandchildren. I thought they would be my comfort in old age. I thought they would come visit, check on me, maybe call once a week. But instead, I found myself in an empty house, year after year. At first I made excuses for them. They're just busy. They've got their own families. I shouldn't bother them. But birthdays came and went with no calls. Christmases passed with no invitations. I sent messages, left voicemails, mailed cards. Most went unanswered. A few times they did reply. It felt forced, like they were checking a box out of obligation. It hurt, but I smiled through it, because that's what mothers do, right? There was a moment that sticks with me about 5 years ago. I had a small fall in the kitchen and couldn't get up. It wasn't serious, but I laid there for hours before I could drag myself to the phone. I called my eldest son, Daniel. He didn't answer. I called my daughter, Marianne, straight to voicemail. I ended up calling my neighbor, Mrs. Ramos, who came running over. She's 83, with a bad hip, and yet she reached me before my own children could be bothered to call back. That night, I cried myself to sleep. Not from pain, but from the realization that I had become invisible. You know what's funny? I never asked them for much. I didn't need money or gifts or vacations. I just wanted their presence, a visit, a hug, a 5-minute phone call to remind me I still mattered. But silence was all I received. Days would pass in that quiet little house, and I'd sit with my tea, looking out the window, watching the seasons change, waiting for someone who never came. Sometimes I'd scroll through Facebook. I'm not very good at it, but I try. That's where I saw my grandchildren's birthdays, weddings, baby showers, events I was never invited to. They smiled in photos, surrounded by people, while I sat alone with nothing but a flickering TV and memories that kept me warm. Still, I didn't let bitterness consume me. I knitted scarves, read books, watched my garden grow. I told myself that maybe, just maybe, they would remember me one day. Maybe they'd feel a little tug on their hearts and call. I prayed every night for God to keep them safe, even if they'd forgotten about me. But deep down, I carried a quiet kind of sadness, a hollow ache that comes from knowing you gave your whole life to people who barely remembered you existed. And then everything changed. I never imagined that a piece of paper with 6 random numbers could turn my world upside down. The day I won the lottery, I thought it was a joke. I laughed. I even threw the ticket on the kitchen counter and walked away. It wasn't until I checked again twice, 3 times, that I realized it was real. I was now worth millions. At first, I didn't tell anyone, not because I didn't want to, but because I was still in shock. Then something strange happened. People started calling. Not strangers, my children. After years of silence, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Suddenly, they wanted to visit, take me to dinner, spend time together. I hadn't changed. The only thing that changed was a number on a check. And that's when I realized the truth I never wanted to face. But that part of the story, that's just beginning. Asterisk, I still remember the moment it all shifted. The day after I found out I had won the lottery, I woke up expecting the same silence that had echoed through my house for years. I shuffled into the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea, and stared at the lottery ticket on the counter, just as I had the night before. I had folded it neatly, placed it beneath the sugar jar, and promised myself I'd think about what to do next. But before I could even sit down, the phone rang. I nearly spilled my tea from the shock. It had been weeks since it rang for anything other than a telemarketer or a wrong number. I picked it up slowly, already bracing for a robotic voice. But it wasn't. Mum, it was Daniel. I paused, unsure. If I'd heard correctly, Daniel, I whispered, as if the name itself might vanish into the air. Yeah. Hey, I just wanted to check in. See how you're doing. I could barely believe it. My son, who hadn't visited me in over 2 years, who forgot my birthday more times than I could count, was suddenly checking in. I told him I was doing fine, still recovering from the shock of the lottery win. I hadn't told anyone yet, so how did he know? I didn't have to wait long for an answer. Oh yeah, he continued casually. I saw your name on the news. The lottery story went viral. I couldn't believe it. That's incredible, Mum. Viral. That word hit me harder than the money ever could. My name, my photo, my win it had all been posted online by the state lottery office, and now I was a trending topic. Strangers knew, neighbors knew, and suddenly my children remembered they had a mother. Before I could finish the call with Daniel, another call came in. Marianne, my daughter. Then Jason, my youngest. By noon, I had received a dozen calls and just as many texts. We should come visit Mum. Let's have dinner soon. It's been too long. Too long, yes, far too long. I'd spent birthdays alone, holidays alone. I spent my 75th birthday watching reruns of old sitcoms, eating a frozen meal because no one had called to ask if I wanted company. I had cried myself to sleep on Mother's Day, clutching a card I had bought for myself because it felt better than being forgotten. And now all it took was a jackpot. The hypocrisy stung, but I didn't let it show, not at first. I greeted each call with warmth, each voice with love. My heart, though bruised, still wanted to believe they came from a place of care, not greed. I told myself they just needed a reason to remember. That maybe this was my second chance at family. The next day, the doorbell rang. Daniel stood there with his kids, the same grandchildren I had watched grow up through Facebook photos. They hugged me like we hadn't skipped years. His wife brought me flowers. They called me Nana and asked what I'd like to do with my winnings. Something inside me wanted to scream. I wanted to say, where were you when I was alone? Where were you when I needed help, not handouts? But I didn't, because part of me still longed for the love I had lost. More visits followed. Jason came by with a new haircut and talked about needing help with a new business idea. Marianne said she wanted us to take a family vacation like old times. They laughed at my jokes again, sat on my couch like they belonged there, but deep down I saw the glimmer in their eyes that wasn't love. It was calculation. They wanted a piece of me now that I had something to give. I began to wonder if I had never bought that ticket, if the numbers had never matched. Would my phone still be silent? Would the dust still gather on the guest room furniture? Would I still be just a forgotten old woman sitting by the window? I knew the answer, and it broke my heart. Yet I also saw an opportunity. This sudden attention, however shallow, was a chance for me to take control. I could play along. I could test them. I could find out who they really were beneath the smiles and the sugary words. I wasn't the weak old woman they had ignored. For years I was Eleanor, a mother, a widow, a survivor of loneliness and heartbreak, and now a millionaire with a plan. But I wouldn't let on, not yet. I smiled, I nodded, I offered tea, because the game had just begun, and this time I was going to be the one holding the cards. Before the lottery, I could go months without a single knock on my front door, as it was the postman or my sweet neighbor, Mrs. Ramos, bringing extra soup. After my husband passed, the silence in the house grew louder each year. I used to dream of the doorbell ringing, of one of my children standing there with open arms, saying, "I missed you, Mom." But those dreams faded as birthdays and holidays passed without a word, and then everything changed overnight. After Daniel showed up with his kids, I thought maybe it was a one-off visit, just a fleeting burst of interest. But I was wrong. A few days later, Marianne came by unannounced with store-bought cookies and a wide, practiced smile. "Thought I'd stop by and check on you," she said, holding the cookies like a peace offering. I hadn't seen her in nearly 2 years. She looked around the house like she was seeing it for the first time. "You've really kept this place nice, Mum. With a little renovation, it could be worth a fortune." I forced a smile. My heart dropped not because she said it, but because she didn't even try to hide what she was really thinking. Not "how are you?" or "do you need anything?" Just small talk and hints about money. After that, it was like the floodgates opened. Jason came next, bringing his new girlfriend. He hadn't even introduced me to the last one, and now here he was, giving me hugs, complimenting my cooking. I hadn't cooked anything, and subtly slipping in questions like, "So, what are you planning to do with all that money?" The answer: "I wanted to give absolutely nothing for any of you until you remember how to treat your mother." But I didn't say it not yet. I was watching, listening, testing them. Soon it wasn't just my kids. Distant cousins, neighbors who never spoke to me, even old co-workers I hadn't heard from in 30 years began showing up. All of them had the same tone, the same empty warmth wrapped around their words. "I always thought you were special. Eleanor, you deserve the best, dear. If there's anything I can do to help you manage this blessing," manage, help, deserve. It felt less like affection and more like a vulture circling. Everyone wanted something, and the most painful part, none of them really wanted me. They wanted what I had. They wanted access, not connection. I began keeping a notebook. I'd write down who visited, what they said, and most importantly, what they asked for. Marianne hinted about needing help paying off her mortgage. Jason mentioned investing in a revolutionary app. Daniel asked about a loan just to get through this rough patch. They used terms like help, support, opportunity, but never once did they ask how I was feeling, how I was sleeping, if I was lonely. Not once did they mention the years they'd left me to sit in silence, watching the world pass me by. It was a whirlwind. I went from forgotten to the center of everyone's plans. They started calling me every day, some of them twice a day. I even overheard Marianne once say to Jason on speakerphone, "Just be nice to her. She's not gonna live forever." Like I was a wallet with an expiration date. I laughed to myself that night. Not out of amusement, but because if I didn't laugh, I would cry. And I had cried enough tears in the past 10 years to fill oceans. But here's the thing they didn't know. I wasn't going to be used. Not again. I had spent my life giving time, love, effort, and getting so little in return. Now that I had something they wanted, I was going to do something I should have done long ago. I was going to take my power back. I started laying traps, little ones. I told Daniel I was thinking of donating most of the money to charity. His face changed immediately. "That's generous, but don't you want to keep it in the family?" I mentioned to Marianne that I might move away to a retirement community near the beach. She frowned. "But what about us? We finally have a chance to spend time together again." Again? Since when? Each reaction told me everything I needed to know. Suddenly, everyone wanted to visit, but none of them remembered the woman who once rocked them to sleep, who skipped meals so they could eat, who stayed up sick with worry when they didn't call home. Now they were here. But they weren't here for me, and I was ready to see just how far this game would go. After so many years of silence, rejection, and aching loneliness, part of me wanted to believe this was real. That maybe the lottery win was a blessing not just for my bank account, but for my heart. That it had somehow shaken something inside my children. Maybe seeing my face on TV, hearing my name again, reminded them of the woman who once meant everything to them. I wanted to believe that I wasn't just a winning ticket to them now. I wanted to believe this was a second chance. But another part of me, an older, wiser part, wasn't so sure. It's strange what loneliness teaches you. In those quiet years, I learned to read between lines, to listen for what people didn't say. And now, as my once absent children began showing up with gifts, hugs, and polished smiles, I felt something underneath their words that didn't sit right. The warmth in their voices felt too practiced, the compliments too rehearsed. There was a look in their eyes when they asked questions about my plans for the money, like sharks circling just below the surface. I tried to test them small things at first. I told Jason I wasn't feeling well and needed help getting groceries. He said he was busy, but would send someone. Marianne called once while I was crying quietly in the living room. I didn't say a word, just let the silence hang. But instead of asking what was wrong, she launched into a story about how tight things were financially. She didn't notice my pain, or didn't care to. And Daniel, he brought flowers and a bottle of wine, but then subtly asked if I'd named a financial power of attorney yet. Just in case something ever happened, he said with a smile. I knew what that smile meant. He wanted control, not care control. That was when I realized the horrible truth. This wasn't a second chance. It was a second betrayal, just dressed prettier. The first time, they abandoned me. Let me rot in silence while they built their own lives. The second time, they returned only because I had something they wanted. The love they offered was conditional, and that condition had 6 winning numbers. I sat on my porch one afternoon, watching the wind play with the autumn leaves, and I cried. Not because I was sad about being alone again, but because I finally saw it for what it was. I had never stopped loving them. Even after all the hurt, the neglect, I had still held out hope, and now they were using that love as leverage. They didn't deserve this second chance. But maybe I did. Maybe I deserved a second chance to choose myself this time, to do what made me happy, to stop waiting for their love and start living in the truth of what was. So I made a decision. I called a lawyer, not one of the ones Daniel recommended, a woman I found myself sharp, smart, no nonsense. We sat in my kitchen, and I laid it all out. I told her I wanted to set up a trust, not for my children, not for my family, but for causes I believed in, for elderly women like me who had been forgotten, for shelters, for scholarships for young girls who had no one in their corner. I left a little for my grandchildren, just enough so that they'd remember their nana without turning into vultures like their parents. But the rest, it was going to people who needed it, not those who pretended to need me. It felt strange, powerful. For the first time in years, I wasn't hoping for someone to choose me. I was choosing myself. The next time Marianne visited, I told her I was finalizing some estate planning. She perked up instantly. Oh, that's great, Mum. I'd love to help with that. I smiled. Already taken care of. She blinked. Oh, who's handling it? Just someone I trust, I said. And I meant it. Because for once, that someone was me. I could tell she wanted to ask more, wanted to fish for details. But I had already closed that door and locked it from the inside. That night, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the stars. For the first time in a long time, I felt something like peace. Not because I was surrounded by family, but because I had finally stopped begging for love I'd already earned 100 times over. The truth was painful, but it also set me free. This wasn't the reunion I had prayed for, but maybe it was the lesson I needed sometimes. The second betrayal is what teaches you how to finally love yourself. It started with a fruit basket. I remember it well 2 days after the news of my lottery win went public. A large glossy basket wrapped in cellophane with ribbons and a card that said, "We love you, Mom, Daniel." I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't received a gift from Daniel in over a decade. Not for birthdays, not for Christmas, not even a just thinking of you kind of gift. And now suddenly, a basket of imported pears and chocolate-covered almonds. It should have warmed my heart. But instead, it felt cold, and then came the flowers. Dozens of them, delivered by people who couldn't even pronounce my name right. One bouquet from Jason, one from Marianne, and this one, ma'am, doesn't have a name, but says, "You deserve the world." That one arrived with a note and a picture of a resort printed on the back. Was I supposed to feel special? Loved? I didn't, because love isn't bought at a florist or a gourmet store. Love is sitting next to someone when they're sick. Love is holding their hand when the world feels too big. Love is showing up, not showing off. These gifts weren't about me. They were about them trying to cover up years of silence with shiny bows and sweet smells. I remember one evening sitting on the sofa with a pile of unopened packages at my feet. Kitchen gadgets, fancy robes, expensive slippers. None of which I asked for. All of which came with one common theme. People trying to look generous so they could ask for more, because right after each gift came the call. "Did you get the flowers, Mom?" "Oh, good. Hey, so listen. I hope you liked that bracelet. I know it's been tough. Also, I wanted to talk to you about something important. I'm just so happy we're reconnecting. Speaking of, I've been looking at a new place, but I'm a bit short this month." Each present was a transaction, a bribe wrapped in gold paper. There was one moment that shattered me more than the rest. My birthday. I hadn't celebrated my birthday with my children in over 5 years. They never remembered. But this year, a surprise dinner, all 3 of them there. Candles, cake, a bottle of wine I couldn't pronounce. They toasted me like I was royalty. Jason said, "To the queen of our hearts." And for a second, just a second, I let myself believe it, until Marianne accidentally left her phone unlocked on the table, and I saw a message light up from Jason. "Don't forget to ask about the inheritance at the end. She's soft after wine." My heart stopped. I didn't say anything. I just stared at the phone until Marianne saw me, grabbed it quickly, and gave me a shaky smile. "Everything okay, Mom?" I nodded, but inside I was breaking. That night, after everyone left, I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just sat there, frozen. The house, once again, was quiet. Only this time, it wasn't the silence that hurt, it was the noise they had brought. The fake laughs, the practiced hugs, the greedy eyes behind every compliment. I walked round the house and began packing the gifts into boxes. Every robe, every gadget, every box of candy. I didn't want to see any of it again. I didn't want my home filled with reminders of their manipulation. I donated everything the next day. I kept one thing, a small card that came with the first fruit basket. It said, "We love you, Mum." I taped it to my mirror, not because I believed it, but because I needed to see, every morning, what I almost fell for. I needed the reminder that love without respect is just control. That night, I wrote in my journal, "The gifts have stopped feeling like love, because they never were." And something changed in me. I stopped answering every call. I stopped letting them into my home without warning. I stopped pretending that I didn't notice their motives. I started building a wall not to shut love out, but to keep manipulation from creeping back in. Love, real love, shows up in the silence. In the years when you have nothing to offer. In the calls that aren't about money. In the hugs that ask for nothing. I hadn't felt that from them in years, and no gift could buy back the time they stole from me. So now, I was learning to live without it. There's a kind of silence that screams. That was the silence I lived in for most of my life, especially after I lost my husband. A silence where my voice didn't seem to matter, where my opinions were brushed aside, where I became just Mom, the woman who cooked, cleaned, gave, and asked for nothing in return. But something in me shifted after the lottery. Not because of the money, but because of what followed it. The lies, the manipulation, the empty hugs, the way my children, who once ran from responsibility, now ran toward my bank account. I had watched them play their parts. I had seen their rehearsed sympathy, their fake concern, their carefully chosen words that all led to the same place. What's in it for me? For months, I let them dance. I smiled through it, watched them test the waters, ask their quiet questions, drop subtle hints. I wanted to see how far they'd go, but I knew the dance had to end, and I knew it had to be me who ended it. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon when I invited them all to the house. I told them it was for lunch, just something simple, nothing fancy. I miss having everyone together, I said. They came quickly. Of course, Jason brought wine. Marianne came with a store-bought pie she passed off as homemade. Daniel arrived last, with that same smirk he always wore when he thought he was a step ahead of everyone. I had everything set. Sandwiches, lemonade, a clean table under the old oak tree in the yard. It was a picture-perfect gathering. You'd think we were the happiest family in the world. But I wasn't there to celebrate when everyone sat down. I didn't wait. I stood, cleared my throat, and looked each of them in the eye. I have something to say, I began. Immediately, they quieted. Jason stopped pouring. Marianne put her fork down. Daniel raised an eyebrow, amused. I know why you're here, I said, voice calm but firm. I know what you've been doing, and I know what you're after. Marianne blinked. Mum, what are you talking about? I didn't flinch. I'm talking about the gifts that come with strings. The phone calls laced with guilt. The visits that end with requests. The fake affection. Jason leaned back in his chair, sighing. Oh, come on. We're just trying to spend time with you. No, I said. You're spending time with my money. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, awkward, truthful, I continued. For years I waited for a birthday card, a simple call, some proof that I still mattered. And when I got nothing, I grieved. I buried my hope the way I buried your father. Quietly, alone. Marianne looked like she might cry, but I couldn't be sure if it was guilt or performance. Then I won the lottery. I went on, and suddenly I'm popular again. Suddenly I matter. You're hugging me, bringing me gifts, showing up. Like magic, but not because you love me. Because you love what I can give you. Daniel scoffed. That's not fair, isn't it? I asked. Then tell me, Daniel, when was the last time you called just to ask how I slept? When did you visit me before I was on the news? When did you say I love you without asking for something afterward? No one answered. I took a breath. I'm not angry. Not anymore. I'm disappointed. Not in you, in myself, for letting it go on this long. For letting you treat me like an ATM with a heartbeat. Jason shifted in his chair. Marianne wiped at her eye. I want you to know, I said slowly, that I've made arrangements. My money is going where it will matter 2 causes that speak to my soul. 2 people who need help, not just want handouts. I will not be manipulated anymore. Daniel's face hardened. So that's it? You're cutting us out? No, I said softly. I'm setting boundaries. You're always welcome in my life, but only if you come empty-handed and empty-hearted. I want no gifts, no performances, just honesty, just family. They sat in stunned silence. It was the first time I had spoken so clearly, so directly, in decades. I felt lighter, like I had opened a window inside myself that had been sealed shut for years. That afternoon, no one stayed for dessert. They left quietly, each of them with their own storm behind their eyes. I don't know what they said to each other later. I don't know if they blamed me, or if they finally looked in the mirror. All I know is that I finally spoke up, and it was the most powerful thing I've done in my entire life. After that family lunch, the one where I finally told the truth, I found myself surrounded by a strange kind of quiet. Not the painful silence I had known before, but one that felt cleansing. I could finally breathe again. None of my children called for days. No surprise texts. No guilt-tripping voice messages. No sudden deliveries wrapped in ribbons. And strangely, I didn't miss it. Instead, I started noticing the love that had always been there, the kind that didn't wear perfume or show up with expensive wine. The kind of love that didn't ask for anything in return. It came from unexpected places. The first was my neighbor, Mrs. Harmon. She's 84, walks with a cane, and always smells like lavender and old books. For years, we exchanged little waves from across the driveway, but never much more. The day after my family meeting, she knocked on my door holding a small pot of soup. I heard voices yesterday, she said with a knowing look. Didn't sound like a celebration. I smiled, stepping aside. It wasn't. We sat at my kitchen table sipping soup that was a little too salty but made with care. She didn't ask for details. She didn't offer advice. She just sat with me. That, I realized, was love. Then there was Kevin, the young man who delivers groceries to my doorstep. A sweet boy, barely 22, always polite. That week, he brought my order and noticed the heaviness in my eyes. "You okay, Miss Eleanor?" he asked softly. I nodded, just dealing with some family things. He handed me my receipt and paused. "My grandma says family doesn't mean blood. It means who shows up." He walked off without waiting for a response. Those words clung to my heart all day. Love, I was beginning to see, wasn't the big gestures or the dramatic reunions. It was quiet presence. It was someone remembering how you take your tea. It was someone sitting with you in silence, just so you don't have to be alone. Love was not a fruit basket or an apology, wrapped in manipulation. It was deeper, simpler, honest. I thought back to my late husband, George. He was never one for grand declarations, but every time he opened the car door for me or rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep, that was love. Every time he remembered the name of the woman who cleaned our church or held my hand during boring sermons, that was love. It was never loud. It never needed to be. One morning, I sat on the porch in my robe with a cup of coffee, watching the sun climb over the trees. That's when Lucy came by, my former student from when I taught Sunday school 30 years ago. She was grown now, with kids of her own. She had heard about my lottery win from a cousin. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, "for teaching me to be kind when I was too angry to know better." She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for favors. She just hugged me and said, "You mattered." And I cried, because I had spent so long trying to earn the love of people who were supposed to give it freely. I had forgotten what it looked like to be loved without conditions. That week, I began writing down the names of people who had loved me when I had nothing. Old friends, long-lost students, kind nurses, church members who had dropped off casseroles without asking anything in return. People who would come into my life for moments, but left me with warmth that lasted decades. Decided to start calling them, one by one, just to say thank you. One of them was Clara, a woman I hadn't spoken to in years. We used to volunteer together. When I called, she was shocked to hear from me, but within minutes, we were laughing like we used to over coffee. And powdered donuts. Do you still hum when you clean the windows? She asked with a chuckle. Yes, I said. Every Saturday morning. She paused. I've missed your voice. That's what real love is. Not gifts, not guilt, not manipulation. Real love is someone missing your voice. Real love is someone remembering the song you used to hum. Real love is someone showing up. Not when you're in the headlines, but when you're invisible. I started keeping a love journal. Every day I wrote down one act of kindness that had nothing to do with money. A smile from a stranger, a call from an old friend, a handwritten letter from someone who had heard my story and said, I believe you. It reminded me that love isn't gone, it just doesn't always come from where we expect. And sometimes when family fails you, the universe sends other people to remind you that you still matter, that you're still seen, that you're still loved. Asterisk, they say, money doesn't change people, it just reveals who they truly are. At first, I didn't believe that. I used to think money was just paper and numbers, that it couldn't possibly have the power to twist hearts or flip loyalties. But after winning the lottery and watching the people around me transform, I saw it firsthand. The changes were swift, sharp, and painful. And they weren't just in them. They were in me, too. The first shift happened within days of the announcement. Suddenly, I was Mama again. Not Eleanor, the aging widow they barely remembered. To call no, I became the most popular person on everyone's contact list. Jason sent flowers. Marianne brought muffins. Daniel showed up asking if I needed help fixing my garden gate after ignoring me for nearly 2 years. But it wasn't the love I longed for. It was performance, theater, and I could see it in their eyes, the calculation, the waiting. They were polite, but impatient, sweet, but strategic. They were hunting for openings. Jason suggested investing some of my winnings into his business. Marianne wanted help with her daughter's college tuitions, something she had never once discussed with me before. Daniel proposed a family trust that suspiciously gave him control over my finances. And in the middle of all this, I was still grieving. Grieving the woman I used to be, the one who didn't question a hug or doubt a phone call. Money had changed them, yes, but it had also changed me, and not just in the ways you might think. It made me cautious, suspicious, wary. It made me scan every smile for hidden motives. It made me second-guess kindness, wonder if warmth was genuine, and brace myself for disappointment, even from my own children. That realization nearly broke me, but then something else began to happen. I started to change again, but this time in ways I never expected. I became stronger, more aware, sharper, braver. Money, in its cruel and ironic way, forced me to find my voice. I had spent most of my life giving and giving, hoping love would come in return. I poured myself out until I was hollow, until I barely recognized a woman in the mirror. But now I had options. Power, not because of the money itself, but because of what it revealed. It pulled the mask off the people I had clung to, and that truth, though ugly, set me free. Began setting boundaries. I started saying no, Jason, I won't fund your business. No, Marianne, I won't co-sign a loan I don't understand. No, Daniel, you cannot manage my estate. Each no felt like a revolution. Each refusal felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I had lost in decades of quiet submission. And then I made a decision that truly changed me. I got help. I hired a financial advisor, not someone recommended by my kids, but someone completely neutral. I got a lawyer. I started taking financial literacy classes online. Yes, me, Eleanor, 78 years old, learning about investments and legal trusts from a tablet I barely knew how to use. And I loved it. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. Not because I had money, but because I had knowledge. Because I was making decisions for myself. Because I wasn't asking for permission. Because I was protecting what I had earned, and finally protecting myself. It wasn't easy. The calls slowed. The visits became awkward. Jason got defensive. Marianne cried. Daniel accused me of forgetting where I came from. But the truth is, I hadn't forgotten. I remembered too well. I remembered the Christmases I spent alone while they vacationed. The birthdays they skipped. The hospital stays they never visited. I remembered everything. Money didn't erase that. But it helped me stop pretending it didn't matter. And in the midst of all that change, I found something even more valuable than wealth self-respect. I used to beg for scraps of attention. Now I choose who gets access to me. I used to think love meant sacrifice. Now I understand that real love never demands you shrink yourself. Yes, money changed them, but it changed me too. It showed me the cracks in what I thought was solid. It helped me rebuild a life not based on fear or obligation, but on truth, and I'm still changing. Every day, I learn more about who I am when I'm not bending to please others. Every day, I get closer to the version of myself my younger self always hoped I'd become, and for the first time in a very long time, I'm proud of me. It took me longer than I care to admit to fully accept the truth. They didn't love me. Not really. Not the real me. Not the one who sat alone on Christmas Eve, or the one who called and left voicemails that were never returned. They only loved the version of me who held a winning lottery ticket. It sounds harsh, I know, but truth has a way of sitting quietly at the edge of your life, waiting for you to finally look it in the eye. And when I did, it broke me at first. I tried to convince myself otherwise. I told myself maybe they were just caught up in excitement. Maybe the money made them nervous. Maybe they didn't know how to express love in any other way. I wanted to believe that deep down they cared, but over time their actions told the story. They only came when they needed something, never when I did. One day, I faked a cough on the phone with Marianne, just to see if she'd offer to come by. "Oh no, Mum," she said quickly. "Feel better. I've been so swamped lately." Hours later, I got a text from her. "Any chance you could help with Mia's dance tuition this month? They raised the fee last minute. So unfair." I stared at the message for a long time before putting my phone down. It wasn't just Marianne. Jason, who once told me I was his rock, hadn't called in a week until he saw a rumor online that I was donating to a community center. Then he showed up with coffee, smiles, and a business proposal tucked into his coat pocket. Daniel tried to be subtle, offering to help me manage things so I wouldn't get overwhelmed. But he never once offered that help before the lottery. Not when I had trouble paying the electric bill. Not when the sink leaked for 3 weeks and I had to fix it myself at 7-4. They didn't love Eleanor. They loved Eleanor the benefactor, Eleanor the jackpot. They loved the image of me, not the soul. And that realization, though freeing, was devastating. It made me question every moment of my past with them. Did they ever really see me? Did they ever care when I cried alone after George passed? Or when I went into the hospital for tests and nobody showed up? Or had I always been invisible until I became valuable? I tried one last test. I sent out a message to all 3 of my children, telling them I had decided to donate a large portion of the winnings to charity. I said I wanted to give back, to help others in need more than myself. The silence that followed was deafening. Not a single response for 3 full days. "No, that's amazing, Mom. No, we're proud of you." Nothing. And then came the storm. Jason called, furious. Said I was being reckless. Asked who had convinced me to give their inheritance away. Marianne cried. Said I was punishing her for being a busy mother. Said I didn't understand how hard her life was. Daniel, he just stopped calling altogether. And that's when I knew. They didn't just love the money. They believed it entitled them to me, to my life, my time, my loyalty. But love doesn't come with conditions. Love doesn't tally up gifts and keep receipts. Love isn't reserved for winners. It was never about the money. It was about what they thought I owed them. And now that I was reclaiming my choices, setting my own limits, they were gone. I sat in my living room that night, staring at the family portraits on the wall, smiling faces, birthday candles, graduation, gowns, moments frozen in time, moments I used to believe meant something. And maybe they did, once, but now I saw those smiles for what they really were, snapshots of expectations, images of a mother who gave and gave and gave, believing she'd eventually be enough. But the truth is, I never needed to be enough for them. I just needed to be enough for me. And for the first time in decades, I stopped trying to earn love. Started loving myself instead. I joined a book club at the library. I started volunteering at the senior center. I made new friends. Friends who didn't ask about money. Friends who asked about me. I started building a life around truth, not guilt. I stopped answering texts that were only about transactions. I started answering calls from people who said, "How are you?" and actually waited for the answer. And in that, I found a kind of love I'd forgotten existed. The kind that sees you. The kind that stays. Even when the bank account is empty. The kind that never needed a lottery ticket to begin with. There's something sacred about silence, real silence. Not the kind that comes from being ignored or forgotten, but the kind you choose for yourself. The kind that settles into your bones and tells you, you are finally free. That's what I felt the morning I woke up and didn't feel the urge to check my phone. No texts, no expectations, no guilt, just quiet. It had been a few weeks since I told my children I wouldn't be giving them more money. I expected backlash, of course. But what I didn't expect, what truly broke my heart, was the way they simply disappeared. Jason stopped by once, dropped a letter in my mailbox, and left. In it, he said I had changed, that money had made me selfish, that I was becoming someone he no longer recognized. But he was right. I had changed. I was becoming someone I barely recognized myself. And for the first time in a long time, I loved that woman, because the Eleanor I used to be. She was tired. Tired of proving herself. Tired of being the doormat. Tired of hoping love would eventually come if she just gave enough. The Eleanor I was becoming, she was dangerous in the best possible way. She had boundaries. She had strength. She had the courage to choose herself over manipulation, over guilt, over the hollow echo of conditional love. And the moment I took back my power, it was surprisingly small. I was at the grocery store, picking out apples. A young mother was nearby, struggling to calm her fussy child. I smiled at the little girl, made a silly face, and she laughed. The mother smiled at me and said, "Thank you." Most people just stare or walk away. We got to talking. Nothing deep, just groceries, recipes, life. And then she said, "You remind me of my grandmother. She passed last year. She was strong, just like you. Strong, she didn't know. Me. She didn't know about the lottery, or the betrayal, or the silence from my family, but she saw strength. I walked out of that store feeling taller than I had in months, not because someone recognized me, but because I recognized myself. It's easy to forget who you are when you're buried under years of unmet expectations and unreciprocated love, when you're told your value depends on how useful or generous you are. But that day, in the middle of the produce aisle, I remembered, and that memory became fuel. I stopped asking for love from people who only saw dollar signs. I started investing in myself. I hired a therapist not because I was broken, but because I deserved to heal. I began painting again. My hands, though a bit stiff, still remembered the brush. The colors came alive beneath my fingers, and so did my soul. I traveled, alone. I went to places I had only seen in small towns, quiet, beaches, flower festivals. I sat in silence with strangers and listened to their stories. I laughed more in those few months than I had in years. I wasn't running away. I was running toward something, toward freedom, toward joy, toward Eleanor, and the more I claimed my space, the more I realized something else. I wasn't truly alone. There were others like me, other mothers, other grandmothers, women who had given everything and received so little in return, women who had been forgotten until they had something. Others wanted women whose hearts ached for the past, but whose futures still held hope. I started writing letters, sharing my story, at first just with my local community center, then on a blog, then through videos. The responses were overwhelming. Women wrote to me saying, "You put my story into words. You reminded me I'm allowed to choose myself. You gave me permission to stop apologizing." And in giving them that, I gave it to myself. Power, I learned, isn't loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or fanfare. It's quiet. It's waking up. And knowing you're enough. It's saying no without explanation. It's choosing peace over chaos. It's looking in the mirror and not seeing shame but strength. My family still hasn't come around. Maybe they never will. And yes, there are days when that hurts more than I let on. But I no longer carry that pain like a burden. I carry it like a lesson. And the most powerful part, I survived. I rebuilt, and I became the woman I always needed to be. For myself, not for them, not for the applause, but for the quiet truth that I matter, that I always did. I used to think love came with conditions. That if I did enough, gave enough, smiled enough, stayed quiet enough, someone would stay. That if I just kept showing up, even when I wasn't invited, they'd see me. They'd love me. But I was wrong. Love doesn't work like that. You can't buy real love, not with kindness, not with sacrifice, and certainly not with a winning lottery ticket. I learned that the hard way after the initial excitement of my lottery. Wind faded, and my children realized I was no longer handing out blank checks. Something shifted. The warmth in their voices cooled. The visits stopped. The texts dried up. They vanished as if the money had been the only glue holding us together. At first I blamed myself. I thought maybe I'd been too harsh. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe, deep down, they were good people who just lost their way. But the truth sat in my chest like a stone. They loved what I gave them, not who I was. It's a terrifying thing to accept, that the people you brought into this world, the ones you nursed and held and sang to sleep, might only see your worth in terms of what you provide. But there's something strangely freeing about that. Kind of heartbreak. It strips you bare. It forces you to redefine love entirely. So I did. I started asking myself, what does love feel like when it's real? I remembered small things. The way George used to place a cup of tea by my side every morning before heading to work. The time my friend Carla stayed on the phone with me for 2 hours while I cried, just breathing with me. No advice, no judgments, just presence. That was real love. I thought about how my neighbor's teenage daughter always waved to me when she passed by on her bike, and how, on days I didn't wave back, she'd come up to the porch and check on me. That was real love. I remembered the woman I met at the cancer support group years ago. She didn't even know my last name, but she held my hand during chemo, rubbing my back when the nausea hit. That was real love. None of them ever asked for a penny. None of them calculated what they gave. Real love is inconvenient. It shows up when it costs something, and most importantly, it never has to be earned. It just is. I began filling my life with people like that. People who didn't know my bank balance. People who cared if I was sleeping well, eating enough, feeling okay. People who didn't flinch at silence, who didn't bolt when things got hard. I poured love into them, too, not through gifts or grand gestures, but through time, attention, vulnerability. I stopped wearing the mask of strong Eleanor and started being real. And what I found was, people leaned in closer, not further away. They weren't repelled by my pain, they were honored by it. They didn't run from my honesty, they respected it. One afternoon, I was sitting on a park bench, painting the lake. A woman, probably in her 40s, sat beside me. She complimented the colors I chose, and we got to talking. One of those gentle, surprising conversations that goes deeper than expected. When I told her a bit of my story, not everything, but enough, she teared up. Then she told me her own. She had been adopted. She never knew her birth mother. She'd spent her entire life wondering if she'd been wanted, if she was loved. I reached into my bag and pulled out one of my sketchbooks. I flipped to a page I'd drawn weeks before, a faceless mother holding a baby, both surrounded by light. "This is what love looks like," I said, "even when we're separated." She cried. I cried. To strangers who found a moment of connection, not through wealth or convenience, but through truth. That's what real love does. It connects, it sees, it holds. And I've come to believe that's what we're all here for. Not to be perfect, not to impress, but to love freely, fiercely, and without condition. I may have lost a family, or maybe I had just lost the illusion of one, but what I gained truth, I gained peace, and above all, I gained the ability to recognize what real love actually feels like and the strength to walk away from anything less. If someone had told me, years ago, that I'd be sitting here today sharing this story not as a victim, but as a survivor, I wouldn't have believed them. Not after everything I went through. Not after watching my own children drift away from me like strangers. Not after realizing that love, at least the kind I gave so freely, was not always returned, and certainly not after discovering that my worth, to them, seemed tied to a lottery number and a bank account. But here I am, and I am not bitter. That surprises people. They expect anger, rage, maybe even revenge. But I've learned something far more powerful. Bitterness is just another form of attachment. And I've let go. Let me take you back one last time before the money, before the heartache, before the betrayal. I was Eleanor, a grandmother, a woman who cooked Sunday meals and bought birthday cards months in advance. A woman who had dreams once, many of which were put on hold in the name of family. A woman who, despite it all, believed that love would always win. I still believe that, but I've learned to look for real love. Not the kind that smiles when your wallet is full and disappears when your boundaries are set. In the quiet aftermath of everything, I rebuilt, not out of desperation, but out of choice. I moved into a smaller house, one that I could manage alone. No grand staircase, no guest rooms I knew would stay empty. just a cozy space filled with light, books, my paintings, and peace. I adopted a senior dog from the shelter. His name is Oliver. He doesn't care about my past. He just wants belly, rubs, and soft blankets. That, my friends, is unconditional love in its purest form. I started volunteering at a cancer support group, sitting beside women going through the fight of their lives, letting them know they are seen, that they matter, that they don't have to do it alone. And little by little, I felt whole again. People often ask if I ever forgave my children. The answer is yes and no. I forgave them for who they are. I released the weight of resentment because carrying it only hurt me. But I also accepted that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it simply means peace. And peace is exactly what I have now. I don't chase calls. I don't beg for attention. I don't cry over empty chairs. I pour love into the places where it grows into my art, into quiet moments, into people who show up, fully and honestly. I'm not forgotten anymore, not by myself, and not by those who truly care. The greatest gift I gave myself wasn't money. It was truth, the truth that I am enough, the truth that real love can't be bought. The truth that sometimes the family you create for yourself is stronger than the one you were born into. So, to anyone listening to this who's ever felt used, abandoned, or unseen, I want you to know this. You are not alone, you are not crazy, and most importantly, you are not unlovable. You deserve love that is soft and strong, love that asks nothing in return, love that sees you even when you're at your lowest. Love that stays. If you're surrounded by people who only clap when you're winning, walk away. Build a quieter life, one that whispers safety and breathes kindness. Because in the end, wealth doesn't reveal who people are, it amplifies it. And when the noise fades and the vultures leave, what's left is you. May that version of you be free. May she be whole, and may she always, always choose herself. If my story touched your heart, please know that sharing your own voice can bring healing not just to you, but to someone out there who feels just like you. Leave a comment and share your story. Like this video if you believe in choosing peace over pain. Subscribe to hear more stories like mine, real, raw, and rooted in truth. Share this video with someone who might need to know they are not alone, because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell your truth, and I'm honored you listened to mine. Thank you.